More important than this. And if I've ever, okay, we're bringing him in. People, 35 minutes in, Christopher Phillips in the house. Chris, sir, how goes the battle?
How's it going? Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's the internet is amazing. Technology is amazing in that it allows these absolutely random encounters to occur. Chris, do I know? Or are you Are you in a dorm room or are you at home?
I'm in my dorm right now, actually.
Okay. I say when I saw it on the wider angle, I won't stay on this. I never lived in a dorm, but I know what they look like. Chris, okay, for everybody who doesn't know what's going on, do I need to play the question again or not?
You might want to play it. I think it gives a good explanation as to what's going on. I don't think a lot of people would do what I did, so I think it would be great to play the clip.
Let's do this. I'm going to bring it up. This is Cernovich who posted it with his good assessment as to the impact, the reach of this video. Let's give it a listen.
Hi, thank you for coming. My name is Christopher Phillips. I'm a first year at the college. My question is for Mr. Stelter. You've all spoken extensively about Fox News being a purveyor of disinformation, but CNN is right up there with them. They pushed the Russian collusion hoax. They pushed the Jussie Smollett hoax. They smeared Justice Kavanaugh as a rapist, and they also smeared Nick Sandmann as a white supremacist. And yes, they dismissed the Hunter Biden laptop affair as pure Russian disinformation. With mainstream corporate journalists becoming little more than apologists and cheerleaders for the regime, is it time to finally declare that the canon of journalistic ethics is dead or no longer operative? All the mistakes of the mainstream media and CNN in particular seem to magically all go in one direction. Are we expected to believe that this is all just some sort of random coincidence, or is there something else behind it?
Too bad. It's time for lunch.
You have 30 seconds.
No, I mean,
Brian.
there's a clock that says 30 seconds. But I think my honest answer to you, and I'll come over and talk in more detail after this, is that I think you're describing a different channel than the one that I watch. But I understand that is a popular right-wing narrative about CNN. I think it's important when we talk about shared reality and democracy. All of these networks, all these news outlets have to defend democracy. And when they screw up, admit it. But when Benjamin Hall, the Fox correspondent, was wounded in Ukraine, the news crews at CNN and the New York Times stopped what they were doing. They tried to help. They tried to help him get out of the country. They tried to find the dead crew members. That's what news outlets do. That's how they actually do work together. To your question about sharing those kinds of connections and trust, we don't talk about it enough there. We don't share that reality about how that happens. And with regard to the regime, I think you mean President Biden. The last time I spoke with a Biden aide, we yelled at each other. So that's the reality of the news business that people don't see, that people don't hear. They imagine that it's a situation that simply is not. But I think your question, it speaks to the failure of journalism to show our work and show the reality of how our profession operates. We have a lot of work to do, I think.
All right, man. Chris, let's start from the beginning. If I may ask how old you are, because you got to be 21 or 22?
I just turned 19 a little while ago.
Tabarouette. 19. This is not the first time you've forayed into public speaking, I presume, because there's no way that could have. There's no way you don't have prior experience in public speaking.
I'd say, just in general, I pride myself on being a good public speaker. I practice by myself, but I haven't done Toastmasters or anything like that. I've just practiced and made sure that I knew what I was doing and I was articulate. A big part of it is knowing what you're talking about. So, I mean, just from a young age, I've seen CNN has spread all these lies, and most of these have come in the last 2 or 3 years. So it's not hard to recollect all of this fake news that has been spread by CNN. So I just rattled them off, and you heard what he said.
No, it's amazing. I'm just the chat's enjoying this. So what are you studying right now?
Right now, I'm thinking about econ, poli-sci, and public policy. That's a hefty workload. I might drop one just because of what's happened, and I might focus on other endeavors. But just sort of that idea of the intersection between policy and government and free markets, I think is so important, and I'd love to work in the future in that realm.
All right, I won't pry too much into Ordinarily, when I have a guest on, we go back to childhood. But where are you from? How many siblings? And I guess where did this event even take place? Start with siblings, and where are you from?
Well, yeah, I think that actually in this case, my origins kind of have a big role to play in the story and what this means. So I'm from Southern California. I went to public school for all but 1 year of my education. You can imagine the political climate is not super, amenable in a sense. It's not right wing in the slightest. But I would say I became politically aware around the time of the 2016 election. I had no siblings. It was just me and my parents. Around the time of the 2016 election, I was in 8th grade. And so, I mean, you're like a young kid right there. You don't exactly know what you're talking about when you think about anything like that, whether you're conservative or liberal. But I began to look into, what politics was really all about and sort of theory of it and what actually makes candidates differ besides the colors of the parties. So I look into it and I begin to think about what is the difference between these two ideologies, frankly. And my parents tell me, the Republicans, these people are, they're bigoted, they're whatever, right? And then, the left-wing people like Obama, I grew up with Obama on my TV for, the majority of my childhood. So I just sort of assumed that was what he was all about. And I didn't really get any dissenting opinions from that. There's no diversity of opinion in a place like that. But what happened was I began to listen to the RNC on the radio, and I began to really hear what Trump was saying, because the narrative is Trump is evil, Trump is crazy, racist, extremist, whatever. And that's what I believed because I was just a young, impressionable kid. But I started to do my own research, and I suppose it kind of came about organically that really I agreed with this guy on a lot of what he was saying. A lot of it was common sense, but the media freaked out about it. The people at my school freaked out about it. I was the only outspoken conservative throughout middle school and high school. And I was faced with people who, most people were apathetic, but a lot of people fervently disagreed with me. And they didn't make that a secret. They would come up to me and they'd call me this and that. And I never called them anything back because I frankly just took what I believed and I listened to thinkers and other people. And I came to my own conclusions. And so I'm willing to debate and discuss things with people. You're a kid, you're in middle school and high school, people get nasty because they don't know what they're talking about. So they have to resort to cheap attacks and insults. But I believe that it truly came organically. It didn't come from my family. It didn't come from my peers. I listened to this stuff and I sort of came to my own conclusions. And now that I'm at the University of Chicago, it's just been spectacular because it's, of course, a majority left-leaning campus, but there are people who think in all different kinds of ways. And I have to respect it so much. This is a great school compared to even, I believe, the Ivies, right? Like Harvard and Princeton. They are very monolithic, I think, in their thought. They're all woke. It's radical left, in my belief, at least, is from what I've seen. The conservative papers at other schools are all quite mild compared to us. They don't really stand up for true conservative values, is what I have seen. I write for a publication called the Chicago Thinker. It is the premier publication of the University of Chicago at this point in terms of our audience. So that's something we pride ourselves in. It's the conservative and libertarian paper at our school. And just working with them has been so upbringing. I didn't really have that support from the people around me. Of course, I love my parents, but we didn't share the same ideological background. So coming here, I have really just been able to explore that on a whole new level.
See, so just JC says siblings. What does that matter? And I think you highlighted anyone who's you're a sole child or youngest of 5. You might appreciate these questions shape, or at least the answers to these questions can shape a person to become who they are. My sister's a middle child of 5 and the only girl. That's definitely going to explain, or at the very least allow you to interpret their life experience. But no, you said that your parents, and I don't want to get anybody into trouble, but you became conservative, or you espoused conservative beliefs despite your parents and not because of them. Did I understand that accurately?
That's 100% right. So my mom is pretty left-leaning in most things. She's actually grown kind of tired of the COVID stuff, but by and large, she is left-leaning. My dad is sort of middle of the road in a sense. He describes himself as socially conservative but fiscally liberal, which I have some quarrels with that even existing. But that's how he describes himself. And, it does make some sense. He's not super ingrained in the politics. He just thinks that, most of the woke stuff is kind of silly. He doesn't agree with it. But in terms of fiscal liberalism, he advocates for high taxes a lot of the time. And I personally have differences with him on that. So I never had an echo chamber growing up in any sense of that, unless you count the stuff I was watching, which of course I'm watching the stuff that sort of informs my opinion. So people influencing me, I didn't have any siblings, and you're absolutely right that your siblings totally influence who you are, whether they're older or younger, particularly if they're older than you. But even if they're younger, the people you're around really influence you so much, right? You think people tell you you're a mix of your top 5 friends, when that's totally true. But think about your family; you spend more time around them. So the people you're around totally influence you, and I think it's sort of like a magical case in which the people around me, they certainly influenced me, but in a way that sort of hardened my own ability to articulate my views and my beliefs and really explore and get into it myself.
And before we get into the actual event, high school, where you said outspoken conservative-ish views. What does that look like in a high school in California, a public high school in California? Do you get into arguments? Do you get into fights? Do you make enemies? Do you make friends? How does that actually, what does that look like in real life for a kid in high school now?
Right. So at public school in Southern California, to be an outspoken conservative, the bar's on the floor. Essentially, you only have to say, I don't believe in this, that, and the other thing, and then you're a crazy radical Trump supporter, in a sense. So, I went farther than that. One instance I can think of is during the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting. I was a freshman in high school when that school shooting, the tragedy happened in Florida. And you may recall that across the country, we had walkouts. So kids would leave class, usually under threat of, being punished for skipping class, essentially. And they would come out and they would protest for more gun control. They call it common sense reform, right? They said, we need to take people's guns away because what's happening is not okay. And they were totally influenced by the media, I think, which totally gets into what we're going to be talking about with the whole idea of disinformation. There's more to it than meets the eye, but a certain narrative was pushed onto young people in that era. And I looked past that and I came to my own conclusions. So when people came out and they did a walkout, and actually at my school, it was a school sponsored event. So they said, you're not going to be punished. You're not going to get detention or whatever if you cut class at this time to do the walkout, which I think is ridiculous, but ancient history, right? So that's what happened. And everyone came out to the front, to like the lunch area. And what some people had their signs about, no more death, right? Common sense gun reform, whatever it was. And so I said, hang on a second. I'm going to use this not as a chance to silence myself, because some people who didn't agree with it stayed in class. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to silence myself. I'm going to come out because I do think change needs to happen, but in a particular way, not in the form of gun control. So I came out and I had signs that said stuff like respect the second, arm our staff, things like that. I had signs that came out and those went against the narrative. And this is a public school with a lot of young people in the suburbs who are totally impressionable and are not going to agree with me. And I came out there with those signs and people got mad pretty quickly, as you might imagine. It was a heated issue. And I was a freaking freshman in high school at the time. And there's older people there. So I came immediately, I was hounded by a bunch of people. And this was kind of my first major foray into speaking my mind at such a level. People came and hounded me, but I grew and I watched so much of this stuff that I was well versed that I won't say I destroyed them, but I could contend with all of them and we could come to a conclusion. So I think that was really, really healthy what happened. And if I wasn't there, then people would have not been exposed to that sort of viewpoint. And I think that, an echo chamber like that is not productive in any sense. So I'm proud of what I did in that moment. I've done stuff like that. That might've been the biggest one, but I've done stuff like that before. So that's what it looks like. And people in my high school knew me as the crazy conservative kid. And now they definitely do because of all the media that I've gotten in the last little while. So, it's proud. I'm proud to stand for my values.
Did that incident or that event get any media attention at the time? A high schooler actually standing up for gun rights despite, what is a clear, easy narrative to run with?
Actually, no, it didn't. There wasn't any media present. There weren't any media sources present, but everyone knew who I was at the school itself. So that's kind of the purpose that it served. Didn't really go over so well in terms of people who didn't know me. They sort of have this impression that I'm like a wacko in a sense, but they understand that, at least a lot of the mature people knew that I'm someone who's going to stand up for my views. And maybe if they, dig deeper, then maybe a couple inches, they're going to understand that I am not, some crazy person, but I do just have a separate perspective on things and that I'm willing to talk to anyone or, I'm tolerant. They say we're the intolerant side. I'm the most tolerant person. I'll talk to Marxists, communists. I'll talk to anyone. But there's people who won't talk to me and who criticize me without even knowing me. So, I tell them, we should have a conversation about it because frankly, what you're doing is singling people out, and you're limiting your own intellectual growth, right? Do you actually believe in the achievement of finding the best ideas? Do you believe in the value of discourse, or do you just want to be right? And so I think that that's something that a lot of people, particularly in high school, because you're less mature then than you are at a university, but people couldn't really contend with the idea that someone disagreed with stuff that was agreed upon by so many people. They couldn't really understand the idea that you had to contend with ideas. So people kind of had their thoughts about me, but in reality, I guess I just stuck with it.
Have you had any Twitter, social media exchange with David Hogg at any point in time?
No, I was too young at the time. He's sort of maybe 4 or 5 years ahead of me. But I've only recently been on Twitter, in the sense that really since this blew up, that's been my entire presence. So maybe 5 or 6 days. But it's been fun, and I've been on social media. I haven't really contended with too many people, but I think that the response that I've been getting from the question that I asked has been overwhelmingly positive. I think that even at this school, it's a majority left-leaning institution, and I actually, writing for The Thinker, I have received in the past a lot of people, talking stuff behind your back, et cetera, et cetera. People have their views of you, similar to high school, but there's not people coming up to you and confronting you because they've been radicalized themselves and they think you're some crazy threat to the country or whatever, a threat to democracy, as the title of the conference would have suggested. The title of the conference was Disinformation and the Erosion of Democracy. So they believe that if you don't agree with their viewpoint, if you don't believe CNN and the mainstream media, you're trying to essentially destroy the West, which is so foolish. If anything, I think it's the other way around. But I have received a lot of positive support, actually, from people who are at this school who are mostly leftists. They come up to me and they say, hey, I don't agree with what you do most of the time, but that question you asked, Brian, I thought that was excellent, because I'm tired of these corporate Democrats who don't actually believe in my values and they just want to control people. So I'm happy that you asked them that question and put them on the spot. Good work. And I say, thank you so much for that, because they don't have to say that, right? They don't have to come up to me and express their support. So I think it's really exceptional. And I think it's a testament to the quality of the student body at the University of Chicago. We're a school, like I said previously, that is fundamentally based on freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and debating ideas. I believe we've been voted #1 in free speech for maybe 5 or 6 years in a row. So I just think it's exceptional, and it really proves that we are who we say we are. And I'm happy that I can be part of this school and debate my ideas with people, including panelists, who a lot of the times people are not going to be able to ask a question like that to a panelist. It's not easy, but I'm happy that I'm able to do that here.
Yeah, well, just on one point you mentioned earlier about the Second Amendment, arm the security guards. It always, in the context of high school shootings, it always amazed me that you have armed guards for delivering or picking up, money from a bank, goods from a store. You have armed guards. You don't say, restrict firearms to prevent robberies. You say you guard money, guard jewels, guard valuables, but don't employ the same guarding of the most valuable thing, which are, young lives. I never understood the aversion to that argument, but another argument for another day. And I want to bring this up because I can read this in English. It says Zehakatan Gadol Aye, which means in Hebrew, this is the small one who's large as well. The small one is big. So I think it's a compliment. But Chris, so, the event itself. So how did it come to be, and how did you get a ticket to go? And how many people were there? What was the event attendance and format? And how did you get your question in?
So this panel was part of a broader conference, again, titled Disinformation and the Erosion of Democracy. So I feel like when you hear that, you know that it's already going to be a huge venue to spread disinformation. It was put on by the Institute of Politics at the University of Chicago, supposedly a nonpartisan institute for debating politics and government. It's run by David Axelrod, Obama guy. He worked with the campaign. He was the chief of staff, I believe. So he's heavily ingrained in this society of elites. And at the end of the day, he brings on conservatives too, but these are all token conservatives. So it's people like Bill Kristol. He wasn't here, but he was in another event of theirs. Jonah Goldberg was at this place. He's at CNN now. It's far cry from a real conservative. It's a silly excuse to call them a real conservative. But regardless, you try and bring. He brought Adam Kinzinger to this place. So obviously, not people that represent the true conservative movement today. But regardless, this is about preventing disinformation, supposedly. And what that intrinsically translates to in this case is, the narrative of the mainstream media must be trusted, and anyone who dissents from that, anyone who has an opposing perspective or wants to cover something that the mainstream media deem to be unimportant are now fake news, and they're liars. And that is a chance for big tech to weaponize this term and censor people who don't agree with them. And that's exactly what you were just talking about with Elon Musk. I think it's so important what's going on with this sort of shift in big tech. Potentially, it's nothing set in stone yet, but it's just 100% true that we need to protect integrity of journalism, because nowadays mainstream corporate journalists can be bought by so many interests. So it's so important that we protect people's right to cover different things, and we protect freedom of the press and freedom of speech, because it is under attack like never before. So this event was basically meant, I believe, to spread an agenda towards censorship, an agenda towards shutting people up who don't agree with the elitist narrative. So we have people like Brian Stelter, media, legacy media personnel. We have politicians, like I said, Adam Kinzinger, and also Senator Amy Klobuchar. She was there. President Obama was there. Also, he gave an hour-long talk on the first day. So these are all kind of people who are in agreement, people who believe that, yes, we need to start silencing people immediately. So we come in and we think, hang on, we need to ask questions about this. So I actually reached out to a friend of mine in the IOP, and we got press passes for the Chicago Thinker. Like we said, we're a big publication on campus,
what's
right?
What's the IOP?
So the IOP is the Institute of Politics at the University of Chicago. That's the organization run by David Axelrod that put on this event in the first place. So we got press passes for the Chicago Thinker. It's our publication that's on our website. By the way, you can check it out, thechicagothinker.com. We're also on Twitter and Instagram, so feel free to check us out whenever you get a chance. But we come in, and it's myself and two of my colleagues, Daniel Schmidt and Evita Duffy. So we three go in and we sit through this panel, and we think, of course, there's a lack of diversity of perspectives. They're all sort of agreeing that Fox News, for instance, is totally fake news, clearly. And then CNN is like the indisputable arbiter of truth, frankly. And everyone makes mistakes. It's true. I agree with that. Everyone makes mistakes. I think what CNN does is more than just mistakes, but I give him the benefit of the doubt. And if he's going to claim that they're mistakes, I asked him a question after his panel. It was all totally random. So I think, divine intervention, maybe, that I got the question, that I got the mic, because so many people wanted to ask a question. But so I asked him, I had a question, prepared. I kind of put it together during his panel. I asked him, well, why is it that even though, Fox News is not perfect, clearly they have an agenda, but they kind of, they admit it in a sense. They sort of, their motto is standing up for what's right with the capital R. So you know what that's about. CNN is the most trusted name in news. So that's not indicative of any sort of agenda. That's sort of putting on the idea that you are objective in a sense and totally unbiased, which everyone knows is untrue. So I asked him, why is it that every time CNN makes a mistake, which I gave them the benefit of the doubt, it's a mistake, it always goes towards favoring the Democrats. It always goes towards favoring the left-wing establishment and against right-wing conservative values. That would be a total coincidence if it were not for CNN being totally biased. So I asked him, what gives? And he didn't really have a great answer for it. He said that he yelled at a Biden aide one time, so that meant he was unbiased. Mm-hmm. He said that one time they helped out a wounded Fox News reporter, so that means they're unbiased. I found those random things to be pretty pathetic, frankly, for an answer, because at the end of the day, there is no good answer to what I asked, because of course, they're biased. Of course, they spread an agenda. There's no way to get out of that, honestly. But what he can at least do is say, CNN makes mistakes and we're sorry. We retract the stories when we can. We try and keep a clean slate, but we can't always do that. So excuse us for that. We try and go with journalistic integrity as much as we can, but we can't always. So in a sense, that would be what I expected, but he didn't even go there. He told me, I don't know what network you're talking about, but you're watching a different network than what I watch, or that what I'm featured on. When in reality, you can go back. There's actually an article written about this story that did this. You can go back. Every single one of the things I said, there are documented instances on CNN where he himself said these things. He pushed these ideas of Jussie Smollett, Russian collusion hoax. I mean, 2.5 years we spent on that, and absolutely nothing came out of it. Hunter Biden laptop being squashed. Of course, we know that this happened, and it happened with CNN in particular. And he obfuscates, he pushes away from it, but in reality, we know that this is true. And so the least he can do is apologize, but he didn't even do that.
Well, that's the amazing thing and the ultimate insult to injuries. They never even apologized for Nick Sandmann in particular. They will never apologize for the Russiagate hoax, because at the time they were reporting on it, it was, that was the news. They make the news so they can report on the news. And then when it turns out to be bunk, well, we were just reporting on the news. And we saw Stelter's answer was a bumbling joke. But someone had asked in the chat, it was one of my questions. He says, well, I'll come to you afterwards. We'll talk later. I presume he did not come up to you afterwards?
Well, actually, he did. And I have to give him credit. He did come down to me after. So he held off on lunch for a little while. He came to me, and it was him, 2 or 3 of his goons, and then a couple other attendees. So this room was about maybe 150 people in total, in terms of attendees plus panelists plus other media or whatever. Maybe about 150 people. So it was him and 2 of the guys from his posse, and then it was maybe 8 other people that were interested in what he had to say. I think also one of the panelists came down with him, and we had a conversation. What in reality, when he was on the stage, he was spirited and happy, right? That's what he has to put on, this idea of, we can make this journalism thing work, but we have a lot of work to do. Just believe what we tell you, and then you're looking at real news, essentially, is what his answer was on the panel. But he came down to me, and his entire career is chapter after chapter of kind of being humiliated, and it's kind of sad because his job is he's reliable sources. That's his TV show, is reliable sources, and so his job is to take other members of his industry, other members of the media, and basically call them fake news and discredit their work. And that's a recipe to make a ton of enemies in your industry. So that's why it seems like everyone in his line of work kind of hates him. But he gave that answer up top, and then he came down because he was frustrated because he kind of knew that I had opened up a new chapter in that, and he was already kind of on the fence. His bosses were on the fence about keeping him on. He's being shifted to CNN Plus now, and that is failing totally, of course. So people don't really know what his future is, and apparently behind the scenes, a lot of people are talking about he's going to be fired. So I would have hated to have ended this man's career, quite literally, but he came down to me and he was frustrated, and he talked to me, and he was bitter and he was cold. And instead of trying to look for common ground or trying to figure out what we could find as a shared reality, as he himself described, he was quipping different things like, well, what does CNN lie about? Well, no, that didn't actually happen. We retracted that. No, we covered this a week ago, et cetera, et cetera. So he was really on his game, and I don't think he's super bright, but he's obviously well-versed in this, in the whole media thing. I have to, of course, give him credit. All these people are. So he comes to me, and he's trying to basically gaslight me into not believing what I just said, which is that these lies all happened. What gives? He's trying to, totally out. He's using his tricks, right? And so these media people have tricks, of course. They're very talented in that regard. So he's just trying to obfuscate. He's trying to direct away from the idea that is, you people lie, trying to intimidate me. That's exactly right. He's lying in a sense every step of the way. So I'm trying to keep this conversation focused. I'm asking him, well, for instance, the Hunter Biden laptop story. The mainstream media totally squashed that. You guys talked about how it wasn't relevant. It was a product of Russian disinformation.
Yep.
Yeah. So this idea that the Hunter Biden laptop story was not legitimate, that it was a lie, or that it was totally overblown, that was totally wrong. I told him now people are looking into it. You have to, because everyone knows that it's real, and the New York Times just confirmed the legitimacy. And so he said, oh, well, no, actually, just 4 or 5 days ago, we did a whole 2-hour segment on the Hunter Biden laptop story. So we're actually not, gearing people away from that. And then I come in and I say, well, hang on, because of course that's true, because the New York Times just confirmed the legitimacy of the contents of the laptop. So now you have to report on it. Prior to that, you wanted to distract people from it. And he didn't have an answer for it. So, you can catch these people in their lies by just focusing the debate. Don't let them obfuscate. Don't let them get away from it. You focus the debate on, you told this lie, and this lie. What do you have to say for yourself? How do you explain that? They can't do it. They have to go away from it. It's like political. It's like a politician. They have to get away from it by saying, well, Fox News, we helped this wounded guy in Ukraine. That has nothing to do with the fact that you lie on a daily basis to the American people. So you have to direct the conversation.
And this was the point. Yeah. Oh, we did a 2-hour expose on it. Yeah. That needed to be done before the election, not after your agenda, which, I mean, you didn't get it into your question, but my goodness, I don't know how much more you could have gotten into that question. But Jeff Zucker's, Project Veritas revealing undercover footage of their stated objective to spin anti-Trump. So, you didn't get that in, but what would Brian Stelter have possibly responded to that? You're CEO. You are directed to editorialize anti-Trump. Oh, good. You corrected your lies a year after the election, 2 years after the election. Damage is done. You got what you wanted based on your narrative. But now, he came out to intimidate you is one thing. Did he do anything that would be like remotely threatening or say anything that could be misinterpreted as like, I'll remember you type thing? Or did how long did that after the question encounter last?
So we spoke for maybe 10 or 12 minutes after the panel because of course, he had to get to lunch. So he asked me all these different things. And then he sort of said, okay, when the tide started to turn against him, when we kind of realized all we have to do is just press him on his lies, say, why did you lie? And then he can't get out of it. Right. So once we kind of realized that that's all we had to do, he sort of checked out and he said, guys, I got to get to lunch. Feel free to send me an email is what he said. So I think that I don't really believe that he wanted to, remember me for this. At the end of the day, I am just a college student. This is sort of my first foray into this world of media. But I think that he understood that this was going to open up a big, humiliating chapter in his career. And unfortunately for him, it could be his last. We have to see what really happens. I don't wish anything terrible on the man, but I just think that he lies all the time. So what happens is he leaves after 10 or 12 minutes and he basically doesn't say anything else. He tries to brush it off. I think this is a chapter that he would rather forget.
Well, he can't. I'm going to just make sure. Is my audio better now, people? Let me know if it's still muffled. And I'll find out why it's muffled. And maybe I have a loose wire. Okay, reading the chat. Is it better now, people? Keep going. Well, and while we're doing that, look, the chat. Okay, it's better now. Good. That's amazing. He comes down to you and he's no longer smiley and jovial. He's, you call it obfuscation. And I just say it's the spaghetti on the wall. Throw up as much stuff to try to confuse the issue so you can't stick to one subject, move the goalposts. It's Scott Adams describes it as loser think. It's just classic tactics of avoision, to quote Kent Brockman, and just throw so much stuff out there that you don't know what to respond to in real time. And now dropping a name in terms of reading material. People are asking, what do you read? Where do you get your information from? And who are your authors that you choose, that you like to follow?
Well, I have a lot of thinkers that I follow just in general. My friends even more so because they're older than me. And the thinker, I've only been in college for 5 or 6 months. But, I think of all different kinds of people. I have consumed a lot of, news media. I read a lot of policy books in general. I'm particularly interested in geopolitics. So I sort of understand this idea of like globalization and taking power away from America, away from the dying West and transferring it to, elites, essentially, wherever they may be. So that's something that is big to me. I read a lot of Mark Levin. I think he's a smart guy. Particularly, he's a media guy. So he knows in particular on this issue what's really happening. I've read Tucker Carlson's books. I was on his show, actually. That was like a dream come true, of course. So he has done a lot, and I've read his literature as well. But particularly the particular areas that I look at are geopolitics, and in particular, and also domestic policy in terms of how it relates to the broader scheme of things and how the progression of history is moving. And so are our rights being affirmed or are they being taken away? And what are going to be the consequences of that, positive or negative? So I'm really, trying to get into it. I've got a lot of books on my list. I've actually got a few right here. So, of course, American Marxism, I've kind of begun to get into that one by Mark Levin. But regardless, this concept of ideologies competing, that's exactly what I come to college for, is to try and find the best ideology. But I've been looking into this stuff for, a while compared to a lot of other people. So we'll see where it goes from here. But in general, I am interested in my career and just emboldening the values of this country and what made us great. We don't want to lose that, because then, we give up who we are. So I think that it's important that we don't let our rights and our the common law and common sovereignty be taken from us and put into the hands of a small number of elites, because then they can do whatever they want to us. And I think that with technology expanding, there's a lot more potential for powerful people to take rights from us. They have like big data. They know everything about us. They can make you shut up with the blink of an eye. They ban you from Twitter. The freaking president of the United States is banned from Twitter. And then the Ayatollah and Taliban are tweeting. Are you serious? That's like insane. Who would have thought? So I think it's just important to protect that.
The worst thing about the Trump ban, and I hope my audio is good now. The worst thing about the Trump ban, he was still the sitting president of the United States of America when they did it. It's not that they did it after he lost and after he left. They deplatformed the sitting president of the United States of America. They said, set aside the fact that we think he's worse than the Ayatollah. Set aside the fact that they said, we think he's worse than known designated terrorist organizations. They said, we think that's fine. That's bad judgment. But they said, we think we're more powerful than the sitting president of the United States of America, who was using this as a tool of his presidency. We think we're more powerful than the president. Well, guess what? That means they think they are the president and not just the United States of America. Question: did Stelter block you on Twitter?
I have not seen that. I checked his account, just a few days ago, and he hasn't blocked me. So good on him, I suppose. That's like, rock bottom. But actually, a friend of mine asked Ann Applebaum a question, Atlantic, lady who has written stuff in the past. He asked her, since you covered up the Hunter Biden laptop story, he asked her this the day before I asked Brian his question. My friend Daniel Schmidt, he asked her, you totally did this. You were complicit in this cover up. Why did you do that? And do you think that you should have acted differently? And then her answer was even more pathetic. Her answer was basically, I don't care. I don't think that that's an important story, which that is such a ridiculous thing to say. The fact that the son of the president of the United States has business deals in other countries and they're getting 10% for the big guy. And he's a sex addict and he's got these crack pipes and all of this stuff is on this laptop. You don't think that's an important story? That could be like the biggest scandal in American history. So just total cop out, not a sound answer, but she actually blocked us on Twitter. She blocked the Chicago Thinker on Twitter. So that's our publication. Or we're a bunch of college kids and we ask her a question. Why did you cover up this story? She gets so flustered that she has to block us. Are you kidding me? It's not like we're tweeting her every day, trolling her. She literally got so mad at us that she had to block her. We're college students. We're undergraduates. And she's supposed to be this big media lady and she can't even handle us. That is so, so pitiful. So Brian has not blocked me, but Ann Applebaum has actually come out and blocked us and blocked at least one of our members on their personal account. So I just think that that's so weak. Frankly.
I've taken out my mic, so now I'm onto the computer audio. So we'll Chris, you can hear me fine?
It's good, yeah, I think so.
Okay, sorry about that, people. It's probably a loose wire. I'll figure it out afterwards. Hypothetically, Stelter invites you onto CNN. Do you go?
I have actually put some thought into this. I don't really plan on reaching out to him, asking him to go on a show, but I think I would do it because, I haven't really been in these super contentious debates with media personalities. It's a lot harder than it looks, frankly, to contend with these individuals. You watch the TV and you think, I could outsmart him, but they've got their tricks. You've got your earpiece in and they bring down the volume so you can't hear what they're saying. They cut the camera, they cut the mic. They have all these tricks in the book to try and basically trick you and make you look foolish when it's unfair, frankly, because it's their network. So maybe potentially if they flew me in and brought me in for an interview, but I don't even think then because they are so dishonest in their debate skills, and I'm not super well versed on the formal art of debate. I'm not in debate, but I think I can contend and argue with people who are not out to get me and make me look like a fool. I also think they might dig up stuff from middle school and high school to make me look bad. I don't know what these people will do, frankly, because I think they're on their heels in a sense, because I just know that what they're doing is wrong. What they're doing is fake news. But then again, you have to think, like I just said, all you have to do is limit the debate, just shrink it. Don't allow for this spaghetti on the wall, as you said. Name this lie, this lie, and this lie. Jussie Smollett, you smeared Nick Salmon and you lost big time in the court, which, by the way, in the United States, it's very hard to sue someone for libel or slander. That's a tough standard to prove, and they still had to settle. That's how egregious it was. So you limit it to these lies that they told you. You cite it specifically, then you say, why did you say that? And by the way, Project Veritas, comes out with these clips of Zucker saying, Russia's a big nothing burger. It's nothing. he says this stuff. So they know that it's all lies. They know that they're focusing on stuff that's not true in order to push an agenda and keep themselves in power. This is not like willful ignorance, like, oh, well, we're just covering the story because it might lead, this investigation might lead to something. Who knows? They know exactly what they're doing. So as long as you limit the debate to just naming their lies, don't allow them to bring in, they yelled at a Biden aide, that means nothing. Explain lies right now. And I think maybe I would even do it, but I'm kind of mistrustful of them clearly. So I don't know. I'd have to think about it if they actually did bring it up.
Stelter might have yelled at the Biden. They might have been getting yelled at by the Biden aide because they weren't doing a good enough job keeping the Biden laptop story under wraps. I mean, getting yelled at, they might not have been doing their job properly. They're not fighting over being honest. The last thing on earth that I would ever believe is that Brian Stelter is yelling at the Hunter Biden aide, the Biden administration aide, because they say don't run that story, and says, damn you, we're going to run that Hunter Biden story. I had never actually thought about I thought about the debate intellectual dishonesty tricks. Never thought about the actual technical glitches, like make him look stupid, make him hesitate, and then go to break and don't let him answer because it's not going anywhere. Hadn't thought about that. At one point I broke down Stelter's interview with Jenna Ellis, which was, I think employed intimidation tactics, bringing up her signature on screen and saying, is this your signature? Showing to the world what her signature looks like. Intimidation tactics like that. And she did well for herself. I think you think exquisitely fast on your feet. It would be interesting, but they would bombard you and they would try to talk over you. And even if they had you there, they might not let you get a word in edgewise to get your message out. You gotten any hate, like any meaningful online hate or harassment?
Well, like I said, actually, I think that the response has been outstandingly positive. You're not going to please 100% of the people, but compared to these individuals who have been sort of slandered by the media, like let's say Nick Salmon, of course, or Kyle Rittenhouse, a lot of people in this country hate them, right? Of course, they got a significant portion of the population that do believe the lies of the media and despise these people. I think I'm very fortunate in the sense that not a lot of people actually disagree with what I'm saying, because I think a lot of Americans know it's true that, of course, CNN has an agenda. Of course, Fox News has an agenda, but CNN's is they don't make it known, so they pretend like they're objective. So a lot of Americans, I think, are frustrated. Even my mom, who's the leftist, before 2016 election, she would watch CNN all the time, and it was fairly objective, right? Of course, it's never perfect, but she said that even from her left-leaning background, she can't hardly stand CNN anymore because it feels like they're lying to her. She doesn't believe it. So in that sense, everyone knows that CNN has this insane agenda that they're pushing, this radical agenda at that. So I think that, it just in the broad scheme of things, that is the case, and that's different media sources are going to be doing that. So as for the hate that I've received, it has not been so great, honestly, and I'm so happy for that. There has not been a lot of hate. You're never going to please 100% of the people, but I have I'll put it this way: all of the DMs that I've received, all of the emails that I've received have been positive. Someone will send a reply to one of my tweets or whatever that is challenging what I'm saying. They'll say, well, why don't you call out Fox News too? And I say, well, I'm not the defender of Fox News. I don't know what they're doing, but the matter of the fact is CNN is lying right here, and right here. How do you explain that? Why are they lying? And so that doesn't change based on what Fox News is doing, based on what whoever is doing. So that's the point I'm trying to make, is that CNN is sort of respected almost, or at least they believe they are, as the established indisputable arbiter of truth in journalism. And that's not true, because you grind up your credibility when you lie time and time again and try and smear and defame people, and then you don't meaningfully retract those stories. People see that, and then they know that you're just a bunch of frauds. So I think I have not gotten a lot of hate. Certainly people have not come up to me in person. I have gotten, a good number of people have come up to me and said, hey, great question, Chris. I really liked it. Or, hey, man, what's your name? I really like that question you asked Brian Stelter, and I say, of course, thank you. There are people who I know, text about me, to their friends and stuff. They've shown me it, but in reality, people are always going to be talking about behind your back, right? I'm no stranger to this, right? This is nothing new to me. In middle school and high school, I was the same way, and people were always talking to me. But the difference is, back then they were immature and they didn't understand what made a good question, what made a good political thought, what made a good inquisitive question. They didn't really get that. But now at this university, I think these people are intelligent. Of course, it's a top university, so it's the bar is high to get into this place. I think that pretty much all the people here are quite intelligent, and so they recognize that regardless of your political views, whether you prefer CNN or Fox News, this was a good question to ask. So I have not really received too much hate. It's been nice.
No, and the amazing thing is, it would be a good question to ask of any of the major CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post. It applies to all of them. And people want to say, well, Fox News is no better. They're a little better, not just because they have an agenda, they might be open about it. They just have not fallen for a lot of these tricks or these traps. And I don't know, they made a mistake with Arizona, calling Arizona early. I think they became the news instead of reporting on it. They made a mistake, a meaningful one up in Ottawa. But their mistakes are more like, I won't say honest mistakes. They seem to be nonpartisan mistakes. And even in a way, contrary to their partisan interest mistakes. Calling Arizona early is not what a Trump supporting network would have done. But they make their mistakes and they deserve to get called out for them. But New York Times, MSNBC, Washington Post, CNN, it's collusion among corrupt media entities to affect politics, to affect culture. The question could have been just as good for any of those four. Now, okay, so first of all, it's amazing stuff. The chat is rightly impressed by your eloquence and your thought process. I have another question, somewhat off topic, but you're in university. It might be less woke, less leftist than others, but what is life like now on campus? Not just for the political wokeness, but for all of the other, all the other wokeness stuff that affects behavior, that affects how, males interact with females, that the culture, the climate on campus. What's that like now to be in university as a 19-year-old?
Sure, yeah, and just sort of on your prior point, people are freaking out about Elon Musk owning Twitter, right? People on the left, they don't realize that Jeff Bezos literally owns the Washington Post, and they treat that as 100% okay in the sense of free journalism. They think that that's fine, or they just conveniently ignore it. So I think that that's an important distinction that needs to be made. So there's something else that you mentioned. As for life on campus, I think again, I haven't been here so long compared to some of my classmates, but it is definitely different than high school in a sense. But I think a lot of people in America probably go to college and it becomes more woke, more suffocatingly leftist, right? But in my case, I sort of have a unique case where I went to school in beautiful blue Southern California. And so in a sense, it actually became less woke, ironically, but it's still pretty left wing. So again, it's not something I haven't contended with before. Now, in this case, I have a group of people who will be my friends. They're ride or die because we kind of stick together, people on the thinker. And there's also thinker adjacent people who are not involved in the movement, but who totally agree with me and who agree with what we're all saying. So these people will give you a lot more credit. So I think that I have sort of a safety net almost, and I'm willing to speak my truth and say what I want because I know that I'm going to have people that are going to hold me down, and I will never truly be alone in this world. You'll never be alone because you always have God on your side, right? But even in terms of the people who are around you, I have people who will support me at this place, and I think that that's so beautiful. That's not something that you would have at another institution potentially. As for daily life, you see people doing crazy stuff. I literally right before this, I was in the dining hall and I saw this person who had a KN95 mask on. We call them the suffocation masks. They had this mask on. They're sitting at the dining table and they got the plate of food in front of them. They pull it down and then they take a bite of food and then they replace it. And they're sitting all by themselves in the corner of the building. What are you doing? It's like there's a point where it eclipses common sense to the point where you just look so foolish. I have to say that a lot of these people are dealing with this stuff. People will ask you your pronouns, and if you refuse to say he, him, his, then they will literally they will go to just calling you they. Like you know what I am. Look at me, right? Just take a freaking guess, please. So a lot of this stuff just eclipses common sense, and it's kind of unfortunate. But I have to say that in a lot of my classes, I have felt free to speak my mind. Maybe that's just because I am who I am, but I will say whatever, frankly, my humanities sequence is language and the human. So it's sort of like critical language theory in a sense, like these people talk different. So there's like layers of oppression, et cetera, et cetera. I come in and I'm the voice of reason. I feel I provide the opposite perspective and the teacher lets me speak. So I have to give him a lot of credit for that. And the people will contend with me on an intellectual level. But by and large, people who are left to their own devices and who are not being challenged by conservative, I think, common sense thought, these individuals that are all by themselves, they do stuff that I just think is so contrary to common sense and human nature. Things like with the mask stuff, it's ridiculous. My I love the guy, but my professor from my other class, he was going to take a drink of his coffee, and he said, "Excuse me a minute, I'm going to go take a drink." He actually had to leave the room to lower his mask to drink the coffee and then return in the room. I just think that that's utterly absurd. Where has our common sense gone? But what we're doing with the Thinker, if anything, it makes our job easier at the Chicago Thinker. We cover stuff and we just say what's common sense. We don't have to get super intellectual. We say, why are you wearing 4 masks over your face? That's foolish. That's all we have to do. And it riles people up. But at the same time, I think it changes a lot of people's minds.
That's phenomenal. I had one other question. It was about, it had to do with the logic. I forgot what I was going to say. And you haven't noticed any indirect reprisals from professors, inexplicable bad grades, or other type of indirect reprisals from people who might be frustrated hearing someone speak common sense?
So I've got friends who are not super conservative, right? Like I said, I talk to people of all backgrounds and beliefs, even apolitical, right? I can, get along with anyone. I have people who, and then all of their friends are, radical leftists, as I would say. So then they show me their phones and they're talking about my question. They're talking about, did you see Chris was on Tucker, man? Someone said, how do you not rethink all your life decisions after you're on that show? And I think that that's just like coping and seething, basically, that the fact that I'm on this level, and it's not even about me. It's just that I'm sticking true to my values and they can't break me down. And then I'm seeing such success in terms of spreading my truth. I think that it's so important that if you're a young conservative in particular at an institution, whether you're in middle school or high school or college or even out of college, and you feel afraid to speak your mind, I can't encourage you enough to just stand true to who you are, because if you're even the only person in your life who's conservative like I was, you can make a difference one day. And I thought I wouldn't, be doing this stuff until maybe senior year or I was out of college. It freaking came up to me 6 months into college. So it can happen at any time. So I just encourage you to stand true to who you are and don't back down to these people, even if you seem that, even if it seems that you're under every single threat. You're under threat of low grades from lack of friends. You will always, God has a plan for you. And so just stand true to who you are, and it will all be okay. So as for my professors, I think that a lot of them have been positive, actually. You would expect sort of dissent from them, but a professor I had in a previous quarter actually emailed me and said, "Hey, I saw your question. Great job, young man. Keep asking questions in the mainstream media and keep, being inquisitive." So I have to, give these people so much respect for that, because this is not even a right-wing guy. He taught the language of the human sequence, the critical language theory sequence, but he came to me and he emailed me and he said, "Great job." So I have to give these people respect that they're not as monolithic or single-minded as we might think. They're not as averse to common sense and to compromise. So I just I can't thank everyone enough for the response that I've gotten. I think that it has been overwhelmingly positive. Some of my professors don't even know about it, actually. I had a professor today who I spoke with who you would think, because it's University of Chicago specific, which Chicago doesn't always make the headlines like Harvard or Yale do. And I think that that's, I just think that it's because of the name recognition that Harvard and Yale have. So this conference was big. We were on like every Fox primetime show on all these different places. I'm with you right now. It really made the wave. So I assumed that at least the faculty would all kind of know about it. But a lot of my professors haven't said anything or even indicated that they know. So I think that's actually for the better, probably, in terms of they're grading my papers. Yeah.
Well, it might be for the better, but I'll tell you one thing. I presumed that there was going to be more. My preconceived notion that the university was going to be unhappy with this. It speaks well to University of Chicago, and they must appreciate this. Now, it's not just publicity; it's good publicity, and it shows tolerance of thought and openness of thought and discussion on campus, that this occurred, and that it seems to be welcome from the campus itself. I mean, it's great. It speaks well to U of Chicago. So hopefully they don't do anything to make that not the case anymore. You'll see when this settles down, you're going to be craving that moment again, that energy that comes from it. But what are your plans for the future for your degree going forward?
Well, I've got a lot of work to do. That's true that I'm loving what is happening right now, just in the sense that we're able to actually make waves, and our audience has expanded greatly. I believe we had maybe 5,000 followers on Twitter previously, and now we've got about 30 or 35. So it has just blown up, and we're by far the biggest college conservative paper in the country. So I'm just so proud to be part of this group of people that is working so hard to speak their truth and to look at campus craziness through a conservative lens. And by the way, of course, again, you can reach us at thechicagothinker.com or on Instagram at thechicagothinker and on Twitter at thinkerchicago. So you really ought to check us out because it is sort of a different perspective than you're going to get from any other college students in the country, I feel like. So I'm just so proud to be part of this group. But regardless, I have a long ways to go. I got 3+ years left. I was thinking about triple majoring, but at this point, I got other stuff going on, so that might fall through. But in general, I'm looking at studying the intersection of politics and government and getting into all different sorts of areas around the preservation of the values of our country. A lot of people in college don't know what they want to do, and I feel for them. I feel very very blessed that I have the ability to know what I want right now and know that what I want to protect and fight for. And I think that's really going to help me in terms of knowing what I want to do early, which is protect this country from threats, foreign and domestic, and make sure that we are preserved in that American sovereignty and American strength are protected, because it's just what has made our country and I think the world so great. So that's exactly what I want to do. I could be in media. A lot of people are telling me I got to go become a journalist and save the world, and I thank them for that. But I consider journalism. I consider working on campaigns and with elected officials, and there's a lot of ways to go about it. But I want to help protect this country. That's what I want to do.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. We've been going for an hour, and people will now know this was not a one-off, and it was not a prepared answer. It was not a prepared question from a superficial young man. Chris, it's amazing. What you did was amazing. You're eloquent, well-spoken, and you think well. What drives me nuts is I don't even like calling this conservative thought. It just sounds like common sense.
It's just thought.
So it's amazing. Keep it up. We'll be in touch. Thank you immensely for coming on and spending this much time with me. It was great. I'm not going to end the stream now. I'm going to click you up, but I'll message you afterwards. I'm going to put all of your links in the pinned comment of this stream when it's done. Right now, the Chronicles is already up there as the pinned comment in the chat. But man, Chris, keep it up. You don't need anyone to encourage you. You are motivated, you're driven, and you're principled. So those are the three best things any human can aspire for. One last thought for the crowd before we say goodbye.
Well, thank you so much. It's been such an honor. It's been a lot of fun. A lot of my friends are huge fans of yours. When I told them that you invited me on the show, they said, "What? That's crazy, man. You got to take it." So, I planned on it anyway, but you got a big influence, and I appreciate you having me on. Again, if you're a young conservative or even an old conservative and you're in an environment that is unfriendly to your thought, I encourage you to stand true to what you believe in and speak your mind, because sooner or later, you will be very happy that you did so. So I encourage you to do all that. You can hit us at the Chicago Thinker, and you can also hit me on Twitter and Instagram at CrispyTheTruth for more content. But I thank you so much for having me on. I'm happy to come on anytime. It's been great.
Beautiful. I'll talk to you soon. I'll message you afterwards, and all the links will be there. Chris, thank you very much. Have a good day.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah. That was amazing.